episode of Philosophy from the Frontline. This is episode number 71. So I've got a distinguished panel here. I got JB and I got Dale. We're going to be talking about human capital investment. And that's one of the things that as we go through our lives outside of the uniform, one of the things that I've seen is a gaping hole in development of leaders is investment in human capital. When we were all young in the military, and this is one of the things that like you don't realize how big of a deal it was until you get out and you have some hindsight and some vision on it afterwards, is understanding like there's at least one person, maybe two, that invested in you as an individual, that gave you some guidance, gave you some pointers, and then checked in on you every now and then to make sure that you were doing okay. We'd like to call those mentors. I know for me personally, I don't think the Army mentorship program was very good towards the end of my career. I had some really good discussions with folks towards the tail end on like night shift and OIR with some colonels that were in the leadership space, and they were thinking like, hey, how can I take what I've learned in the uniform and translate it to developing new leaders and the next generation of leaders? But those were more one-offs than they were a common trend. And so that's kind of why we're talking about it, because I think human capital investment is an important aspect of everything that we do. Helps you in your business life. If you're still in the uniform, finding that one person that you can invest in will give you something intangible that you wouldn't normally realize that you missed until you get to the point where like you run into somebody years later that's doing great, or you have somebody check in and report and say like, hey man, I worked with a guy that used to work with you. He speaks highly of you and he's doing a great, so both of those things are very, very important. But I know that one of the struggles that a lot of communities have, particularly in the commercial space with hiring veterans, is understanding, that type of investment, because it's completely different with a guy that was a paratrooper or a person that was in the Ranger Regiment or in the 82nd or whatever organization you came from. There's different ways of mentoring people. And the contemporary example, and I know John and I can talk about this because we work together on Jumpmaster teams, right? But that's a simple way of showing mentorship in the Army, is being a jump master and being the jump master crew. So I have the senior jump master with the rookie safety or vice versa to keep that kid in check. So I have the most current school driven thought process, and then a guy that's been around the block a couple of days that can kind of give it some of their touch on it. So like, I think that's the best jump master team, is a new guy and an old guy working together, and then somebody, in the middle kind of covering the gap. So you've hit everything. Because when I think about it today, like we have an entire generation of paratroopers. There's dudes with master wings right now that have only jumped the T-11 parachute, which is frightening by comparison to our generation growing up having multiple different parachutes, multiple different platforms, different ways of getting it done. And technology evolution is okay, but still remembering some of those old ways of doing things is important as well. But I'll pause there. How are you guys doing today? Dale, what's going on? And then we'll roll over to JB. How are things in your world?
So I'm alive. All right. So, still in school. This is an interesting subject, that, being a business student currently at the number one business school in the state of North Carolina, Fayetteville State University, go Broncos, the Broadwell College of Business and Economics, a little plug there for my future alma mater. I think to this discussion, I think what I can bring to this is in typical NCO fashion, the bridge between academia and actual application. You guys have got a lot more experience in corporate America physically. I've got the experience from academia, so I can inject how the culture is being molded at the foundational level. And then you guys who may not be totally dialed in on at the academia level of business can sit there and go, aha, now I kind of see why things are the way they are in corporate America, because they're being groomed this way. So I think, if I focus kind of on the academic applications of this discussion, I think that'll be beneficial. Anyway, it's good to see you guys.
Yeah. JB, how about you?
So you're talking about mentorship. I'm going to first trying to take some notes here and gather my thoughts. Rob, you talked about the importance of the jump master, the importance of that, of those lessons that are learned at the, really at the tactical and technical level. One of my favorite memories. I got to he got to work in the G3 plant shop in 2ID as a baby captain, and got to work with got to work for two incredible field grade officers, Paul Yinling and Jim Raymer. After we parted ways, Jim Raymer went on, did great things in the engineer community. Next time I saw him, he was taking command of 37th Engineer Brigade out of Fort Bragg. He walked into G3's office, and I heard the voice, and immediately recognized, and we picked up right where we left off. Fast forward 2 months, I'm pulling a duty. I think I'm pulling a duty out on Green Ramp, and here's Jim Raymer, brigade commander, pulling a safety and doing it by the numbers. Just an incredibly proud moment. But he was doing the whole mentorship from within, being that humble warrior, coaching, teaching, and mentoring his own brigade's leadership by being there and doing it with them. Now the other highlight that I want to go back to, Dale, you and I were both in first 325 under Don Clark. I love that guy. He provided more leadership and mentorship than any other battalion commander on the street. Granted, he was, when it came time for his first OER, he was ranked 9 of 9 battalion commanders in the 82nd Airborne Division. He definitely put his thumbprint. He definitely put his thumbprint on us as in a very good way. His leadership mantra, or his leadership philosophy, was two simple lines: master the tools of your warfighting trade. It's like, okay, that's kind of what we're supposed to do, and then treat every soldier like he's the most important one in your formation, because he is. A couple of simple lines that they're not. He didn't make it sound bites. He made it real for the organization. Colonel Clark was the first one. He was the first one to leave the office on Friday afternoon, because he wanted to make sure that everyone else got out. And you didn't just burn the candle at both ends to burn the candle at both ends. He set the example by doing the right thing and walking away from work when the job was. The leaders, I look at the leaders that I worked with after that, and it was the same. It was the same but different. They said the wording. I saw a lot of folks saying the words, but not living it out, and not being the professional and walking away when it was time to leave the office. That tried to dot every I and every T and make sure that every passive sentence in the memorandum was eliminated. Don taught us to do the job, do it right, do it with vigor. And if you get to the 80% solution first, you're probably going to win.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think we have, and one of the advantages that we have, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, is we grew up in the zero defect army. So when we were in the zero defect army, that made the job that much harder, right? So to be a great leader was being able to balance all the requirements of the army and doing it well, and then excelling at it. So when you look at the guys that were like the top of the heap, and you had two type of top tier leaders when we were in, right? You had the guy that was in it for himself and the guy that was in it for his team. And the guy that was in it for his team usually may not have been like the top 5 percentile guy. He might have been the top 10 percentile guy, but he was well respected, and everybody in his organization would go to bat for that person, versus like, oh, that guy's in it for himself, and if you've worked in a G shop for more than 2 days, sadly, the part of the organization that's mostly like that is the G2 section, right? Hey, I've got to build my reputation in the intel community, so when I transition out of the military, I can go work for the agency. And sadly, that's just part of the culture that I've never seen change. It hasn't changed the entire time that we were in, and I would bet you a shiny nickel today that it hasn't changed that much in the Army writ large. And I think, being able to ferret out, or being able to see those people, is very, very easy. And the difficult part of it is like when you're working with those folks day to day, you don't really see it, but soldiers will see it a lot sooner than you will, because you're just focused on task accomplishment. and the who is around you like, oh, that guy sucks, or that gal sucks. And you're like, man, like, why do these guys hate him? Oh, well, they called us in on this weekend to make us do something silly, because, well, we got to get this done because the commander needs it or whatever it is. And I know that, that's one of the things that's always difficult is like some people, I used to tell people all the time, it's like, hey, if I'm yelling at you, then you're probably okay. Because if I'm communicating with you aggressively, that probably means that I still think that there's work to do and it's an on the spot correction. However, if I stop, then I'm probably looking to, get review in some capacity.
So Bob Morshauser, awesome individual, great human being. If he was still calling you girlfriend, you were good. The second that he stopped. The second that he stopped tossing those jabs at you, you knew that there was something wrong or there was something else afoot. Not being the knuckle dragging infantryman, being the guy that got locked in the closet with hard problems and got to come out for air a couple times a week. It was very comforting to work with those leaders that would throw those jabs at you to make you and. They're not jabs to make you worse, but to make you think about a problem a different way.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that, like, especially when you're in the bump and grind, like when you're in the operational theater and you're just pushing, particularly if you're in the G5 or the 357, that's like the most thankless job, right? The only thing worse is the G5 itself with the future plans. And we got Dave jumping on, so
hey guys.
We got
time zone, huh?
See, we can tell the O's are all serious. Rob, JB, the NCOs throw some shit up there.
Man, deuces, y'all. Good night.
And you wonder why we're the backbone. So let me throw something in here, because like we can give anecdotes of great leaders and crappy leaders. And we really can. Every one of us has had great leaders. Every one of us has had crappy leaders. And we're talking about human capital. I'm going to give a shameless plug to one of my best friends out there. He was my PL in Desert Storm. Captain Joe Sacchetti, retired. He wrote a book called, Guts, Smarts, and Love, Live Your Life the Ranger Way. And it is a series of anecdotes of officers and NCOs that were all Ranger qualified that Joe had the experience of serving with. And he has brilliantly taken real world anecdotes from each one of these people and told the anecdotes and then applies it to corporate culture and the lessons to be learned and apply to corporate culture. It's a great book. I'm not, just because the last chapter in the book is about Private Dale Roberts in Desert Storm. Hey, you'll learn something about me if you know me. But it's in line what we're talking about. And I will say that the human capital, one of the great things that the Army, or the military, but specifically the Army, because not all militaries are the same. And, they have different cultures. And talking about Don Clark, one of the great things about Don Clark is he is what I would categorize as a muddy boots leader. He was technically and tactically brilliant, but he also knew how to connect with his guys. His guys. He loved his guys. And you felt that in the battalion. Joe Private felt connected to Don Clark. Don Clark's biggest weakness was he knew how to pull the best out of all of us. He knew how to make an entire battalion of paratroopers, officers, enlisted, and NCOs love him. The officers respected him. The NCOs respected him. Everybody loved him because he knew what he was doing and he knew how to connect with you, which did not go over well with his peers. So his OERs reflected. However, you never wanted to go against 1st of 325 toe to toe. because we would live, eat shit, breathe, and die on his command, and did. So he was he was a dynamic leader, but back to the original thing that he understood: the commander, the manager, the district manager, the CEO, the CFO, the COO. They create the corporate culture. They set the tone. Don Clark and dynamic leaders like Don Clark understand that they set the tone for their organization. And that tone drives everything. They set the standard for the culture in that organization. The Army understands something that corporate America is just now starting to transition to, and they're grooming their next generation with it. Historically, the term manager always meant you manage your people, you manage this person, you manage that person. Culturally, academically, they are now driving into the next generation of business leaders the term leader. They specifically differentiate between the term manager and leader. You manage systems, you manage processes, you do not manage people. And they drive that home. The shortcoming in academia is they don't understand what the military understands is grooming. Leaders are not born. They're made. That statement of leaders are born is the biggest lie. Not one of us was a leader at 17, 18, and 19 years old. We were made to be leaders. Someone institutionally and operationally trained us to be leaders. And the military is brilliant at having institutional leadership and then operational leadership. And one of the best leaders I ever met was he was the Force Com commander. He was also the deputy commander of the 18th Airborne Corps, and he was my battalion commander. And he retired as General Dan Allen. And Dan Allen implemented at the Force Com level the leader development branch in the G357. And its sole purpose was to work with TRADOC to start getting the operational in line with the institutional. Because we all only spent 1/4 of our learning in the institutional environment. The other 75% was operational. So he wanted to get a synergistic, and that was his term, a synergistic existence between the institutional and the operational. This is an area where the culture in corporate America is lacking. There is actually, you're raised in academia to constantly be constantly improving yourself, which is good. Getting the company that you're working for to invest in you. And while they're investing in you, you're constantly looking for the next big thing in another company. It is culturally acceptable to see people working for multiple 2, 3, 4 different companies in a 3-year time period. Because instead of the culture of corporate America instilling the values that we instill, loyalty, duty, we joked about leadership, and now that the acronym leadership, and now that we're in the outside world, we see how the acronym leadership actually mattered. And it was ingrained in us in a way that we didn't even really kind of get. We kind of joked about it, but it became who we are. And corporate America does not instill that acronym leadership in the culture. There's a protectivism in the culture. You guys groomed the next generation of leaders in the O side. The NCOs groomed the next generation of leaders on the O side and NCO side. The NCOs were this magical creature that if they were a competent NCO that didn't catchphrase take pride in what they were, but in their, and John can tell you, I wasn't the most articulate dude on the planet, but I had his back 100%. And that's not to say that I was his yes man, because I wasn't. I was they call the NCOs the voice in the officer's ear. I was his voice. I would sit behind him when he was the S3 and I was his NCOIC. I would sit behind him in meetings and then lean forward and go, "Don't forget about this, sir." It may have been irritating because it seemed like I got Sergeant Roberts micromanaging my ass, but every now and then I knew I said something. He was like, "Oh, fuck yeah. I forgot about that." That's what we do. We groom our officers and we groom the next generation of NCOs. Corporate America doesn't groom the next generation. They teach them just enough to get the job done, but not enough to take their job.
Yeah,
That's a very key distinction that you just made in a big way. And I was going to expound on that when
everybody in this discussion trained the next guy, train that captain to be the major, train that staff sergeant to be the sergeant first class.
Right.
We trained our guys and gals to take our job.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it was always about training your replacement. Like, that's what it boils down to. I got to train my replacement, because if I don't train my replacement, we can't move forward.
But culturally, the whole attitude is very different. It's starkly different, all the way down to the soldier level, to the private level. I mean, if you're under my care, and this is where I say we're more selfless as a culture. If you're under my charge, right, and let's say you're wrestling, I don't want you to just go to the Olympics. I want you to medal. I don't want you to be as good as me as a rifleman. I want you to be better than me, because you get so much back in return from that. And corporate America really doesn't, but they're too competitive with each other, and they don't share that demand on the person on the left and right of them like we do.
And they don't embrace the culture of leadership. What does it mean to be a leader? Now, we can all come up with all kinds of anecdotes of what it means to be a leader, but then there's certain aspects of leadership that everyone in this conversation 100% agrees with. That is, you're responsible for everything your men do and do not do. When they succeed, it's their win. When they fail, it's your failure. That's the reality.
You ever see A Bug's Life?
Yes. Yes.
Wasn't that the best? Where that cricket tells the ants who's in charge, and he says, "Oh, you're new to leadership, are you?"
Yeah. The best leaders in the military, when the team got it right, he would go and say, "Hey guys, great job." When the team got it wrong, he'd go in and say, "Hey guys, this got messed up. It's a lick on me. I'll do better next time." Because the leader understands that they are responsible for everything that does and does not happen. And your true leaders, in my opinion, my NCOs hated me when I was a first sergeant. And John can attest to this when I was his ops sergeant major. If a first sergeant came in or some sergeant came in and was him-hawing about, "Oh, so-and-so screwed this up," I will nitpick them to death and be like, "Did you show them this? Did you show them that? Did you explain this? Did you explain that? Did you counsel them?" No. If you gave me a no in any one of those areas, I'd be like, "Then that's your failure, dude. Don't come to me and blame a private for filling up the Humvee's engine compartment to the limit with oil right up to the cap," which, by the way, actually happened. The squad lead, the section sergeant wanted us to give this private an Article 15 for damaging the vehicle because he literally filled the oil in the engine to the cap. And when I called the private in and had the NCO sitting there, I didn't bust my NCO out, but I wanted him to hear my line of questioning. I asked the private, "What were you told to do?" The private said, "I was told to top off the engine with oil." I said, "Okay. Have you ever worked on an engine before in your life?" The kid was like, "No, First Sergeant." I said, "Do you know what a -10 is?" And he said, "No, First Sergeant." I said, "Did anybody give you a little booklet, a little yellow booklet with a picture of a Humvee on it?" He goes, "No, First Sergeant." And I said, "Has anybody ever taught you how to check the oil in an engine?" He said, "No, First Sergeant." I said, "Get out of my office." And I looked at the squad leader. I said, "That's all on you, brother." I was like, you told a private to go to the commander's Humvee and top it off with oil. He did exactly what you told him to do. He filled that bitch up with oil because you didn't coach, you didn't mentor, you didn't evaluate, you didn't spot check. You didn't do the basic fundamentals of leadership.
Well, and that makes you dive into something that a lot of leaders fail at communicating early, right? Is expectation management, right? It's expectation sent, expectation receive, expectation execute, right? And so I think that's one of the problems as well, is that a manager is going to be like, well, did you see the email that I sent you? A leader is going to be like, hey, man, like, this is the process. I'm going to walk you through it the first time so you understand it. I'll walk you through it a little bit less the second time. The third time you're on your own. Like, we do this in Ranger School. That's one of the best parts about military training, right? What happens?
Crawl,
Darby,
walk, run.
mountains, and then Florida. And what happens with that? Like, it's the same thing with being a jump master, right? I let you be a safety first because, yeah, that's a demanding job, but it's not as technical or as demanding as being the freaking PJ hanging off the side of the aircraft. So then I put you in the AJ slot. So your crawl is safety, your walk is the AJ, your run is the PJ. Like, it's inherently baked into everything that the Army does. It's just, we don't communicate it that way. And so it seems intuitive to us because we've been around it for so long. We spent 20 years of our lives in that process.
But also an aspect of that is the PJ for the jump. And, I'm going from experience for John Busa. The primary for the jump understands the amount of work that his other jump masters and his safeties are doing on his behalf because he's ultimately responsible. So what did he do as the primary just to say thanks and to set the tone and to set a culture within his team to say, I recognize what you guys are doing and I'm going to bring today $200 worth of prime handcrafted, specialized, some prime handcrafted, specialized coffee from a veteran-owned business made in America. It may seem small, but everyone in this group is a coffee drinking beast. And he showed up with 4 gallons, almost $200 of high quality custom coffee for his team. He didn't have to do that. He could have been like, here's your water, bitches. No, he spent $200 out of his own pocket to get his team some of the best coffee that you could buy in the Fort Bragg area from this little place called Amo Espresso. He was friends with the owner. That was me. And he made sure his team had great coffee. That was his way of saying, thank you for all the work you guys are doing. That matters, though. It seems small, but it matters.
JB, you had a point.
So we're talking about the proactive side and I want to say that the fun side of human capital. Yeah, there's also the other side that we're not talking about. That anyone who's served in a leadership role, they're going to have to face it. They're going to have to face at some point. It's when that subordinate fails, when that subordinate leader doesn't get it right. Dale, you kind of hit on it. You analogized it as you kind of get what you pay for as a leader. You get in what you put out, and I can't recall the number of times I had chats with company grade officers saying, just listen to them go through their problem set and just explain that, hey, you know what, man, life is about choices. And you made some choices to get yourself here. Help me help you lead your way out of this problem. In corporate America, I didn't see that. I really didn't see that all that much. I saw, okay, we have a problem. We have a problem with this directorate. We have a problem with this department. Let's come in and fix it all, and we're going to just put the same person right back in charge, or we just take them out and don't communicate to the staff at all why we. I remember early on as a project manager, I had to relieve one of our employees, and after I relieved her, I called the team in and explained exactly why she had to leave the company. It was that was horribly looked down upon by our human resources department for whatever reason, but I saw it as a valuable lesson to the rest of the community, to the rest of the team. It's like, hey, Cheryl isn't with us anymore. Cheryl isn't with us because she wore her iPhone into the skiff not once but 6 times. That that security caught her on. We had to install Wi-Fi sniffers because Cheryl did it. And human resources did not want to have that conversation. They did not want to have that. They did not want to have that negative connotation or that negative environment expressed across the community. So we as leaders have that responsibility. Not only to Dale, you hit it on the head. You share in the success, but you share in the success, but you also share in the failures of the organization. You share in those lessons across the team. Hey, Jimmy did this really well. However, we had to let Cheryl go because she couldn't follow company policy.
Well, and again, it goes back to it's a whole thing of not being afraid to be transparent. One of the worst things that you can be is a leader that is not transparent. Like, look, if you're having a bad day and I've worked with you for 6 months, a year, 12 months, 2 years, however long it is, I'm going to know when you're having a bad day because I'm going to see it on your face, right? I'm going to see it in your actions. I'm going to see it in your demeanor. And if you're like, hey guys, I'm having a tough time because X is going on at home, I don't have to give all the gory details, but you can let people know. So then hey, it's just like when you're on patrol, hey, frickin' Dale's falling asleep all the time. Well, shit, why? Because he's been the point man for the last 3 patrols. So what do we do as the rest of the team? We are going to keep our eyes off of Dale until he gets some rest, right? So we're going to smoke screen. Dave, I know you got a point. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a couple. Got triggered by Dale on a couple things. In a good way, brother. We were talking about how we invest in soldiers as something that had tripped my mind. But isn't it, overall, culturally speaking, and you alluded to this in a lot of different ways, and this is why I struggle a lot now that I'm out. You think about reception and integration, how I was brought in was huge, and that ended up becoming a very large part of mentorship. Counseling was another one that was huge. It makes all the difference in the world to have a guy that's been around doing counseling, especially in a young man's ear. I can attest to you both. I was an 18-year-old with not much male influence at home, so when you show up and you meet this, this guy who's been at it for 15 years, or in my case, some even been in Vietnam, they didn't just look at you as a kid that they didn't want to deal with. They teach, coach, and mentor, and they taught that to us. And you don't see that type of investment at all, and for us, because we appreciate and understand discipline, we take pride in that, so when you mentor, we talk about a guy, me and Rob do all the time, who ended up being Sergeant Major. Oh man, used to live with Sergeant Taylor. He's the other company. I remember looking at him when he was a staff sergeant.
You talk about Klein?
Klein's another one.
Yeah,
man, he's another one. And I don't, oh, well, he made it. No, I could not be prouder of Klein. I hope that some part in his journey that maybe I had a positive part of his career, So you look at these guys, as an 18-year-old kid, even when you don't have nowhere else to go, and they're like, what do you mean you don't know how to pay your taxes? Well, here's how you don't have a bank account. What do you mean you don't have a bank account? How are you getting paid? People that were able to come alongside you, at least even show you or give you basic guidance. I don't know about you guys, but it wasn't my parents that helped me buy my first car. Thank God they were there. And more importantly, even the devil looks like your best friend. You got to be careful of that too. And there are our peers, and I say this out loud. Fuck them. Those are the ones that are cheating when they deploy. You know what I mean? And they're out there too. You're cancerous freaking,
yeah.
They
don't,
luckily I did not have some scum like that to look up
Rangers.
to
Spotlight Rangers.
And to emulate. They were good men.
And I'll tell you,
and it's amazing what one dude can really make on one person if they just fucking try for one day.
I'll tell you, where the rubber meets the road with those kind of experiences with that young 17, 18, 19-year-old who had nobody to really show him anything. And I can say
That's hero work, man.
It
Straight
was,
up.
I can tell you, it was the 2 most miserable, high stress, no sleep years of my life. And that was when I was a drill sergeant.
Yeah, I believe it.
You know,
Man.
when I was a drill sergeant, there was kids that didn't know how to tie their shoes. I had kids that literally, there was 3 times that there was kids literally the day before they got on the boat, on the bus, or on the plane to come to basic, they were living out of a dumpster on the street.
I believe it. That's awful.
One female. God, I wish I hadn't been blown up so many times because John worked with her. She became an officer and she was in the 525, John. She became a captain, but she started as one of my privates and I didn't recognize her. You know, I trained thousands of privates. She came up to me one day and was just like, you know, hey, Sergeant Roberts, I don't know if you remember me, but you were my drill sergeant. And I was like, oh shit. Right. You know, that's the same emotion I have when someone says you were my ranger instructor. Oh shit.
Oh, it's only going to 2 ways, man.
You know, yeah, it's going 1 of 2 ways, right? And historically, you expect it to go bad, but she goes, "I became an officer because of you," and I said, "I made you hate the NCO course so much you became an officer?" And she goes, "No." She goes, "You talked to me one time about going to use maps." And, you know, it was a avenue, you know, she said, "You talked to me about green to gold and you talked to me about going to use maps." And she goes, and one of the things that blew my mind is she goes, "You were the only ranger at Fort Sill." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I told you I wanted to be a ranger. And you said, you know, you meaning me said, look, currently the Army's policy is no on that, but that doesn't mean you have to give up on that dream. And even if you can't go and become a ranger, that doesn't mean you can't be a ranger in your heart and live the creed. You just don't have the tab." She said she said she took that to heart. She learned the ranger creed. She wanted to live the ranger way. Did she go to ranger school? No, she still came in too early for that policy to change. But what she did do was she went to use maps and went to West Point, was on the, you know, what's the cadet ranger challenge teams that they have? She was on the, you know, the ranger challenge team and was, like vice captain of it because she was a stud. And she said, you know, Sergeant Roberts, that it was because of you. I was able to do those things. She goes, because I remembered how you believed in me, even though I was a private and I was a female and I was only 5'3", that if I had the heart of a lion, then I need to embrace the heart of a lion. And I was like, and she went up, and John, I wish I could remember her name because you would know her. She actually became a very competent officer in the 525 in one of the battalions, and then wound up going up to the Brigade 3. And this is all to go back to, you know, when you're a leader, sometimes, you know, it's the butterfly effect. You don't know how your actions, even though they may seem innocuous to you, could change someone's life. I have kids. I got kids that find me in social media and stuff, and they're like, "You changed my life, Drill Sergeant." You know, one kid was an inner city kid from LA that was with the Crips who didn't know how to read. I taught this kid how to read. And when we went up on Christmas break, he said, "Drill Sergeant, I can't go home." And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "The only reason I'm here is to learn military tactics and go back to the gang and teach it to them." And he goes, "And I don't want that. And if I go home and I don't fulfill my obligation to them, they'll kill me." So I got with the sergeant major and we set up a hotel room for this kid to stay in the Fort Sill area during Christmas break. And then, of course, after Christmas break, he came back for the rest of basic training and AIT, and he never went home again, as far as I know, because he knew it was a death sentence for him to go home, because he saw in the Army what the Crips were not showing him back home. And, I'll take credit on that one. That's a feather in my hat. I showed this kid a life that he didn't know existed and changed his entire worldview and his plans for his future. Because his plans were originally to go to the Army, do a couple of years, go back to the Crips, and teach them everything he knew so they could be more effective gangs. Not anymore. He became a lifer. So this is leadership. This is not being so much on your ivory tower that you cannot look at your soldiers and go, something ain't right, and take the time to figure it out and help them work through it. I will tell you one of the worst, and guys, I love leadership, so I pontificate, and I appreciate you guys listening and entertaining it. But, we talked about mentors. Here's an aspect of the Army experience for me that people don't, we always give the kudos to the mentors. There's a role for the assholes too, because Sergeant Major retired Art Padilla, who was my platoon sergeant in the 1st 325 Scouts Recon, said, you as a leader should be a culmination of everything that is best in every leader you have had and everything that is worse in every leader you have had. And you need to apply those to your leadership, because those assholes, the micromanager, the spotlight ranger, the guy that, takes credit for everything and responsibility for nothing, the guy that will throw you under the bus, they have a lot to teach you too. And what they teach you is what not to be, but also know there may be a time and place for what they've done, and you can apply it if necessary, as long as it doesn't violate your ethics, morals, and values as a leader. Because sometimes what you think is being an asshole and a bad leader isn't. So, yes, mentors are important, but the guy who wasn't a mentor, or the gal that wasn't a mentor, that toxic leader, they're beneficial too, because you see what doesn't work. Anyway.
No, that's a true statement. We'll wrap with this. I'll give Dave the last word since he jumped in a little bit later. But any thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, brother. I'm sorry about jumping in late like that, brothers.
No, no problem.
Time zone. I was expecting for another, like now. No, the biggest thing ever to me, though, as I said earlier, was reception and immigration. People used to talk about parachute infantry like we're just a bunch of Neanderthals, and to some degree that's a little true. But in the end, I mean, I wasn't shouted at. I was given direction. Things were taken care of for me. I wasn't just thrown down the hall and had crap thrown at me or some bullshit. I mean, I never saw an environment like that. Nobody went to sleep until all of our equipment was ready to deploy the following day, and we still answered the call at PT. Not just we belonged. It wasn't. I can't understand how somebody could perhaps yell at somebody or talk down to them or humiliate them in some way, and then expect them to want to work for them. It's absolutely sickening to see somebody treated in such a manner. And not all people, like Dale alluded to earlier, deserve such a privilege of having authority. They really don't. Fortunately for me, that was not my case. And overall, that was a culture that I had seen and I had grown to appreciate. While it was a group of an era of people that didn't really have warfare except for the old school Vietnam guys, they were very good to us and they taught us discipline. And a lot of us, I think I learned discipline the way a lot of you did. As a private and 18-year-old, at first you just think it's this silly, stupid thing that you got to do until you see somebody that doesn't have it, right? And then your head holds up a little bit higher. You start sticking your chest out. You start taking more seriously what it is that you're doing, especially in your craft, which is 7-8 all the way. As culturally speaking, I mean, I really felt safe there. As a young kid with nothing. I mean, nothing. I felt safe there. I felt valued. And then the worst part is you find out, you don't realize it when you're a kid, but when you find out, 20 years later that you weren't average. And the truth is, an average person on this planet could never be what you are. And that's what we carry on the outside. And that's what makes hard. It really makes it hard being out. If Dale calls me out of the frickin' blue and says, XYZ just happened, it's true. You know how I know that's true? Because frickin' Dale told me so. That's a cultural thing as well. That's not a cultural thing outside of the infantry. Not even close, man. Good frickin' luck with the fakest people you ever meet. Wondering what great looks like. And, you know, we're not all as young and pretty and studly as we used to be, but quite frankly, you know, we're here.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And you know, I don't know what part of that's changed. I hope it hasn't. My daughter, for those who do not know, she's in the middle of her basic training in the Air Force right now down in Laughlin. And, you know, she's getting her attitude adjustment.
Yeah. Strength and honor, brothers.
You know, it's funny because I say that to other people. Every one of you, all three of you, you just looked at me and you're like, uh-huh. Right?
Yeah.
You know, you think I get that look outside this home? Hell no. They think I'm being a jerk. I'm like, man, you know, no, I'm proud of her, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
You know, Dave, one of the things I used to tell my privates, even the privates that washed out in basic, because believe it or not, it did happen from time to time. Some of them were just like devastated. And I'm like, guys, this is not an equal opportunity employer. Not everybody makes it. Not everybody makes it. But what you have to understand and feel proud within yourself, even if you don't make it, even if you're not the honor grad of basic training, you just made it through. You have to remind yourself of something you never realized. 99% of the people in this country
0.5
lack the moral and ethical courage to sign their name on a piece of paper.
Nope.
The fact that you showed up to the first day of basic training is you have done more than 99% of the people in this country are willing to even comprehend attempting. So every day you spend in your service is one day more than 99% of the people are willing to do. And never look down on yourself.
Not average. You're not average. Average people don't do that. You're above average. You're special.
That's right.
You know, a lot of those kids don't know that, man.
You know why? You know why Rangers and Special Forces have a 50% or more attrition rate? Because if they didn't, they'd be ordinary forces. They wouldn't be special forces. The reason only 3% of the population at any given time is active National Guard Reserve or retired or, you know, is because 97% can't do it, won't do it, or are unable to do it. Or as John Busa used to say, you're either unwilling or unable or able. What was it, John? You would say able and willing.
The four types
unwilling,
of soldiers. Yep.
Yeah.
Willing and able and unwilling.
Yeah. I can't remember it right now, but it was one of the best lines because it really sums it all up. You know, there's guys out there that are, you know, missing legs that would sign up right now if they would let him, and they can't. That person is as much as a hero as the guy that jumped on a grenade because they are willing to do more than the rest of this country is willing to do. And that is a level of moral sacrifice that people can't comprehend. And I've had people sit there and tell me, you know, do you honestly think that you volunteered to have that stuff done to you? Yeah, I did. So you wouldn't have to. I don't say you owe me anything, because if you don't feel you owe me anything, that's fine. I didn't do it because you would owe me something. I did it because I felt it was my responsibility to my nation to do my part with the crazy dream of hoping that maybe the next generation, if I do what I do now, maybe the next generation won't have to. This thing going on in Israel right now, guys, I didn't think my PTSD was all that bad until this event happened. I was flipped out at what happened. I really did. I was bawling. With my hands in my head in my hands, crying. My wife didn't know what to do, and I was like, what did I do it all for? It's no different now. It's no different now. And the abominable events of those attacks in Israel just spiritually crushed me. And because how long did all of us fight that? And it's no different. And it's like, how long is this going to go on? How long? And did I make a difference? Dude, it kills me because, we're the war fighters. We're the ones that saw it firsthand. We're not the theoreticals. We were there. They talk about Fallujah. My sister called me the other day and she's like, I didn't realize Fallujah was as bad as it was. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, why didn't you ever tell me? I was like, because you would never understand it, and you don't need to understand it. I didn't do what I did so you would understand it. I did it so you never have to.
Yeah.
And so anyway, back to, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, brother. It's just, you're hitting all the nails on the head. Part of leadership is not making you happy as a soldier or making you happy as an employee. A major part of leadership is not making your staff or your employees happy, but it is making sure your employees have job satisfaction, because your soldiers, your employees could have fun and enjoy, at work, but really don't want to come to work. Then you can have employees that actually wake up in the morning and want to come to work. And that's because you've created an environment that fosters job satisfaction. And that's critical.
Well, and it goes back to what we started this whole conversation about, investment in human capital, right? If I'm investing in people and they can genuinely tell that, like, hey, the boss actually cares that I'm here today, they care that I'm successful, then what happens is you inevitably develop an environment where people will show up and work. Like I told Dave a couple weeks ago when I was leaving my last job, like I worked from home and I hated, like, if it's that bad, yeah, like if the commute is that short and you don't want to be there, then that tells you, that the environment is incredibly, it's an incredibly toxic environment. But we're going to wrap this thing up because we've talked a lot about a lot of different topics as always. But like I always like getting this group together because, like, there's a lot of different perspectives on leadership, but again, it's pretty much all the same. And I say that not in a bad way, but one of the advantages that leaders in the military have is that common frame of reference. Like, we all have a common sight picture, and that common sight picture makes it easy for us to talk about leadership where other people do not. Because if you put us all in a room and I say, hey, tell me a story about property accountability, you'd get 4 different stories, but the outcome would be the same. Somebody didn't secure their stuff and they got charged, right? Or, hey, tell me a story about, loyalty. There'd be 4 different stories, but guess what? At the end of the day, it was like, hey, this person broke ranks and it caused this problem, or these people stayed together and there was success. That's how it works. And like, that's one of the single greatest advantage that veterans bring to the workplace, is that there's a whole bunch of problem solving skills. Sitting here right now, we have over 100 years of military experience, and that's 100 years of leadership experience as well. And so when you sit down and you look at that, you're like, man, like, not to yank anybody's chain, but like, how often do you have an organization where you can sit down and talk to, 2 or 3 other people that have this much longevity and experience in leadership? You don't. Like, there's startups that don't have, like Microsoft doesn't have 100 years of leadership in their panels because Microsoft hasn't been around 25 years, with the people in position that they're in. And so there's some advantages to that. And that's one of the things that military leaders don't get to see, is because we don't think of it that way. And we are incredibly privileged having served, because you're around people like that all the time. Even the worst leader, like you said, Dale, you can learn something from them. So even in that time, even the worst guy is teaching you something. And it's a blessing and a curse. It's a curse when you get away from it and you're removed, and then you can look from the outside and see how things are going. But we're going to wrap this thing up. This was episode number 71 of Philosophy from the Frontline. So you've got Rob, JB, Dale, and Dave on here talking a little bit about human capital investment and leadership. Always great to have you guys and see you guys, because it's like our quarterly check-in, just to make sure everybody's alive and kicking, and we appreciate that. But this has been Philosophy from the Frontline. I'm Rob Robinson, your host, and we'll see you guys on the high ground. Thanks for listening to Philosophy from the Frontline with Rob Robinson. We will bring you more interesting veteran transition stories, veteran advocacy, and more information in veterans transition in general on a podcast platform near you. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Thanks.